So before we start going ahead, I have a question for all of you. So go ahead and get your fingers stretched. What is, or what are the 5 elements of hip hop? Does anybody know? Arguably, some people say there's 4, but what are the 5 elements of hip hop? You can give me 1, you can give me 5, you can give me a couple. Take a second to think about it. What are the 5 elements of hip hop? And you probably know them. Ooh, rhythm and lyrics. So I will count that. So let's count rhythm and lyrics as 1. So that is 1. And we're gonna kind of go into the names of all of these in a second. So that's 1. Any clue? MC, that is MC Sierra. You already knew. Sierra got what all the lyrics, all that lyric talk was going to be about. So that is MCing. So that is the first element of hip hop. And that's actually the one that we're going to be focusing on today. But does anybody know any of the other ones before we move on? Ooh, let's get one more. Storytelling, yes. DJing, Gabby came through with the second one. All right, let's go to the next slide. So the 5 elements of hip hop are MCing, DJing, graffiti or graph art, breaking, and beatboxing. All of these kind of touch on different art forms, as you can probably tell. Breaking being the more physical, the dancing aspect, beatboxing and MCing kind of depending on rhythm and music and lyrical kind of like parts of music, MCing being more of like the words spoken, while beatboxing is more of the sounds made through yourself. DJing was actually, I mean, in my opinion, is the first form of hip hop that was ever created. And maybe graph art might be following close to that too. As we kind of like heard from that video, hip hop is one of these beautiful, amazing parts of culture. So it goes beyond just music, right? So when we're talking about hip hop, we're not just talking about rap or hip hop music. We're talking about an entire culture and way of being. One of the things that we're going to be talking about today is the connection of hip hop and poetry. So we already know that MCing is really, really important. MCing specifically includes spoken word poetry. It includes rapping. It includes things like freestyling in a group together, which is also called ciphering. It involves all of these different forms of essentially like speaking your truth. And I think that poetry is so important to talk about in the world of hip hop, because I think a lot of times when we hear or talk about poetry, we don't get the full story of what poetry is, especially as an English major. I know that there are a lot of people who love the canon of English. By that, I mean, there's a lot of people who love to talk about sonnets, but they don't want to talk about rap music. And that's a problem. And that's a problem because rap music or anything that is in the world of hip hop is an art form. And we can't ignore that. We can't ignore the fact that that is true. That is completely true. And what that also does is that kind of like deletes an entire history of storytellers, kind of like what Anne was just saying in the chat, like that deletes an entire world of storytelling in all these different art forms. So it's super important that we touch on that. But what is the connection between hip hop and love? So let's go to that next slide. So why love and hip hop? Why am I doing this in Valentine's Day weekend? Why? Well, I think, so as we were just saying, hip hop is more than just a music genre. It is what was created by people. It is what was created by need and by joy and by culture and storytelling. It was created out of people trying to find a form of expression that felt truest to them. And it is now this mega humongous genre, right? It's a huge genre in the music world, and that's a little bit of what they touched on in the end of that video. But one of the things that we're going to kind of be focusing a little bit more on today is how love and hip hop are super connected, in that they both are these feelings, right? I can't teach you necessarily, not in an actual real in-depth way, what hip hop is. You got to just experience it. In the similar way, love, as many stories and books and movies and shows and songs that we listen to, we can't really fully understand it until we are in it. So that is kind of why I put this Mos Def or Yasin Bey, depending on who he is, quote on the screen right now. This is from a song called Auditorium. And this is kind of like the hook of the song. So you know, they know, y'all know, we know what it is, and there it is. And I think that that is exactly how I would personally define love and hip hop. You can't textbook it. This is not one where you can take all the notes in the world and figure it out just by doing that. Much like a lot of things in this world, it is kind of an experience of going through it. So today, the question or our thesis of the workshop, shout out essay writing, our thesis for our workshop is going to be on this next slide. So this is what we're going to be focusing on today. So I hope you all are ready to write, because we're going to be writing love poems. Shout out Isaiah Rashad and SZA for making the best collabs ever. So my thesis for today is that a love poem should be simple, it should be visceral, and it should be honest. So simple in the sense that it should be straightforward. We shouldn't have to overcomplicate the language that we're using in order to be able to speak of complicated topics. In a world with so many different dialects and languages, keeping it simple is definitely going to benefit us when it comes to poetry. I know a lot of times when even I was in school reading like poetry that was a little bit more considered highbrow, I was always just looking for the poems that felt more real to me. I wanted to see the poetry that felt like they actually like dug deep enough that they didn't need a lot of words. I kind of relate this to like when you're talking to one of your friends and then they just like rephrase what you're saying in a way that's so simple and you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. That's exactly what we want to do with love poems. A love poem should also be visceral. And when we're talking about visceral or raw emotions and like really, really strong feelings, we want it to be super detailed. So you want to bring in all of the like really, really dug deep whyness, right? So we want to explain those simple things that we're talking about in a way where our reader is going to be right along with us and know exactly what those emotions are that we're talking about. Lastly, and I think this is kind of the core of most things, and I think should be the core of most writing, is that it should be honest. Love poems and hip hop are just full of honesty. The writing and the things that we talk about in both hip hop and in love or in poetry or any type of literature that we might be learning in school has to be honest, meaning that, like most stuff said, it is what it is, right? Like it's exactly what it's trying to be and it's not trying to be anything else. It's honest, and that's kind of the kernel of it. Because it's kind of the core of it, we're going to start off our first writing exercise with honesty. So this is all up to you. So your first, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to be honest. Be honest about who or what you love. Shout out Chance the Rapper. So think about it. Who do you love? Who or what do you love? And for our example for this writing exercise, if you go to the next slide, we have the wonderful Sunday Candy as our example for our lyrics. So I love the song. If you were wondering what my response to those opening lines of what's a song that you would want to hear again for the first time, my answer would be Sunday Candy by Donnie Trumpet and the Social Experiment featuring Jamila Woods. Also, Jamila Woods is an incredible poet and artist. And if you're curious to see how you can do both, you should definitely go look her up. I'm just saying. I also love Jamila. She's amazing. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to kind of be doing or mimicking this example. Not exactly, right? Because what your task is to just very straightforward write a list of people, places, or things that you love. Do not worry about the little details, any sort of frills, metaphors. I don't want that. I'm asking for a straight up list of things or people or places that you love. In this example, we have the lyrics she can say in her voice, with her eyes, with her smile, her belt, her hands. Only one she loves as much as me is Jesus Christ and Taylor, his brother. And I'm singing for my grandma, right? So right there we have Taylor, his brother, we got Jesus Christ, we got grandma, we got all of these different aspects of this person, the subject of this song. So take a couple minutes now to start writing a list of who or what you love. We'll start there. All right, cool. So you can keep on dropping all of the things that you love, but we're going to go ahead and go to the second part of this writing exercise. So you might want to use either like a separate piece of paper, or if you have room on the same piece of paper, to kind of put it next to it. You're going to pick one, just one of the things from your list. Things, people, places, one of those things. Shout out Lauryn Hill. It could all be so simple. Whoa, whoa. But you gotta make it hard. Okay, so we're gonna go to the example. What's our actual example? So our example is The Royalty of Kehlani. Shout out Kehlani. So this is from the song RPG, which is R&B, Don't Come For Me. We're still gonna use this song. So we're gonna be writing lists of simple acts of love. So for example, with my coconut oil example, if I said I love coconut oil, then I'm gonna start writing lists of simple acts of love connected to the coconut oil, if it's a thing, or if it's a person, we're gonna follow Kehlani a little bit more. So Kehlani has, you told me I'm beautiful, you're lying next to me, you told me you'd stay with me, and you told me you care for me. There's another part of this sample too that we're not gonna look at too much, which is the "'cause I told you" parts, which all repeat after that first statement. The reason that we're not gonna focus too much on the "'cause" sections is because we're not worrying about details again. We're not gonna do it. We're just gonna make another list. We're making another list of simple acts of love. So I'm trying to think of simple acts of love for my coconut oil example, because I'm like too in deep for this. So I love coconut oil. Coconut oil is super moisturizing. It changes into different forms of itself depending on the weather. And it also usually comes in a glass jar. I love that. I love that it comes, we love glass jars here, okay? So those are some of my simple acts of love that I would connect with coconut oil. So I want you to take a couple minutes, write down some simple acts of love connected to either the person, place, or thing that you chose from your list. Shout out and also saying that it makes you feel fancier. Me too. All right, so let's go on to our third writing exercise, and this is going to be the last one. So this is going to be you basically putting it all together. And remember how I kept telling you don't use details? Now's your time to use details. So right now you're going to write in the details to those simple acts of love, right? You're going to really focus on the why. Why are these acts of love significant to you? Why is this person significant to you in connection with those simple acts of love? When we're talking about visceral as an element for love poetry, we're really focusing in on the fact that there's raw emotions, right? Like it's super emotionally charged usually, and it can be leaning on any side, right? It can be leaning on the complicated and the complex. It can be leaning on the really positive, good, warm and fuzzy joy that we feel from it. Depending on what those feelings are, that's where you're going to let those details kind of lead you. Okay, so let's look at our example for this. And I just want to let everybody know that I have done an entire workshop on just this song alone. So Swept the Shaka by Isaiah Rashad featuring Sid. I chose not to just because I was feeling ambitious this time around. But this song, I think for me, is one of my favorite love songs. And it's not a typical love song. It isn't like a "I love you so much" type of love song. It has those elements in it, absolutely. But what it does the best is it kind of encapsulates all those different elements that we have just been talking about. with a big, big lean on the honesty aspect. Sometimes if we're brutally honest, it's not so pretty, right? It's not so love poem. But this song, I think, manages to kind of be honest in a way that's so visceral, so detailed and emotionally charged that I think that it carries out that love really, really well. So in the yellow, you're gonna see some of those details, right? That metaphoric language that kind of expands on the actions. And those actions being kind of started in like those blue sections, right? So I fell in love with your thoughts. I learned it's more than your hips. I left the home with my son. I say, I'll be back. And those are like, they're kind of like sandwiched in between all of those little like yellow lines that we have that go beyond just the simple kind of like matter of fact things that we were just talking about. One of my favorite lines, and I would actually melt if somebody ever told me this, and these stars are nothing but your cousins. Excuse me, Isaiah Rashad. We're all blushing all of a sudden, aren't we? I love that line. I love that line so much because I think that it does so much without having to do a lot, right? It is what it is. And that's what we're talking about at the very beginning. When we're talking about love poems, when we're talking about poetry that I personally would argue is good, it doesn't try to be anything else than it's trying to be. It just is. We also have some wonderful examples of repetition, right? So you hear him calling my name, but I know it's hard for me here. We get that repeated twice in just one whole section. And then the whole hook, the entire hook of this song is to know you love me, it's rare, I know you love me. So that those two lines just keep on repeating whenever that like hook comes back, which is kind of incredible because those two lines, because of all the work that Isaiah put into the rest of the song, right? So into all of those details for explaining these emotions, the hook can just be to know you love me, it's rare, I know you love me. And it carries so much more than it would have just on its own. So that's how you know you've done a really, really good job. So thumbs up to Isaiah Rashad. So again, your task for this last step is to put it all together. Put it all together, give us the details, really dig deep into the why it's important to you. That is all we have for you tonight. So thank you so much for joining us for this workshop. Thank you for showing the love. Thank you for writing a love poem. Oh, thank you, Barbara. Oh my God, thank you. I'm just here to, my tomfoolery and shenanigans. Oh, Thisbe, you're so sweet. Thank you for messaging me. Yeah, so if you have any questions, like I said, please reach out. Otherwise, I will see you at the next one. Bye-bye.